Antifa has been making a lot of headlines lately by name-calling their opponents, interrupting speeches, fighting with the police, and much worse. But are they a terrorist organization? Let's look at who they are, what they believe, how they operate, and if they are in fact a terrorist organization. Grab your seats. It's time for Counter-Terrorism Roll Call. Welcome to Counter-Terrorism Roll Call. I'm your host, Holt Clark. Anti-Fascist or Antifa is a militant political movement. Historically, in the 30s and 40s, they fought the Nazis in Germany. Antifa resurfaced in the 70s and 80s in Europe as the punk movement, as a way to protect themselves from the fascists at the time. Today, Antifa is heavily influenced by anarchist, socialist, communist, and other anti-capitalist philosophies. You can see that in their logo, with the black flag representing anarchy and the red flag representing communism. They use a leaderless structure with few local leaders, but many, especially online followers. They use this online platform strategically and tactically. Strategically, they use national websites like The Torch and It's Going Down, with local Facebook pages like Nashville Antifa, a lot of subreddit pages, and hundreds of Twitter accounts. They also use online platforms tactically to arrange events and coordinate efforts.
Tweet this one out, guys. Police are moving in now.
I said previously that Antifa is a militant political organization. Now, they do use force as an intrinsic part of their political philosophy, and I'll get to that in a minute. But are they really just militant, or are they radical? In my video on radicalization, I gave this definition: the process of adopting an extremist belief system, including the willingness to use, support, or facilitate violence as a method to effect social change. Antifa is radical both by self-description and by definition. And here's some of what they believe. You'll hear them use the term fascist, Nazi, or racist. And really, that's anyone with whom they disagree. Anti-fascists tend to have a worldview, no borders kind of a mentality. So the concept of nationalism, while it might seem patriotic to some, to them is racist. Antifa has accused the Jewish Defense League of being Nazis. A gay man who's married to a black man, Milo Yiannopoulos, was called a racist. And even a Jewish conservative, Ben Shapiro, was labeled a Nazi. The Antifa movement is probably best known for the intolerance of free speech rights of those with whom they disagree. Now, the online website The Torch puts it this way: they don't use the state to prevent anyone's free speech. They say the right of free speech restricts the state from censoring ideas. It doesn't stop the public from opposing hateful ideas. So they say that because only the state can restrict free speech, they personally can do whatever they want to stop you from talking. Now, anti-fascists and anti-racists have an obligation, they say, to deny a platform to bigots. Now, they also talk a lot about direct action, which by that they mean force or violence. They also talk a lot about self-defense, which they say is attacking first, preventing a Nazi from hurting a vulnerable minority. So if I know that you're a Nazi, I have an obligation to attack you and stop you before you can hurt somebody else. Now, they have a lot of different tactics they use. They have online intimidation, including outing and doxing. They'll shout down their opponents. They protest and counter-protest. And they will show up in what they call black bloc. And they're violent, extremely violent. I think it's a combination of the self-righteousness of their cause, the anonymity of the black bloc, and the mob mentality, which moves them far beyond what they might be willing to do as an individual. They use homemade and store-bought tactical gear. They use bats and clubs and knives and bricks and rocks, Molotov cocktails and pepper spray. And it's not just the opponents with whom they're violent. They often turn their violence towards the police. The Antifa enjoy support from a lot of allies, open support, tacitly from the New York Times. On Inauguration Day, a white nationalist known as Richard Spencer was punched in the face live on camera. The New York Times published the headline, "Is it okay to hit a Nazi?" It's easy to have support when you claim to fight Nazis and white supremacists. Who wouldn't support that? They also get direct support. Professor Mark Bray from Dartmouth is the author of Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook.
Why do you defend confronting in a violent way?
Well, first, I would contest the notion that I'm that small of a minority. I think that a lot of people recognize that when pushed, self-defense is a legitimate response to white supremacist and neo-Nazi violence.
While Bray doesn't participate in the group's protest, he nonetheless considers himself an ally. This is Michael Isaacson. He was an adjunct professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. In a tweet, he said, "It's my privilege to teach future dead cops." But is Antifa a terrorist organization? Let's go to the definitions. Terrorism is the threat or use of force against a civilian population to achieve political, social, and religious goals. Terrorist organizations is a political movement that uses terror as a weapon to achieve its goals. I think the Antifa have clearly shown that they have an affinity to use violence to achieve their political goals. As a matter of fact, the Department of Homeland Security has formally classified their activities as domestic terrorist violence. Let's look at the potential of the Antifa movement. They're not the existential threat the global jihad is. They lack a global plan. They don't have the 5-step plan to global domination that ISIS does, although they are following many similar tactics. They're not martyrs. They're not willing to die for their cause. They are very violent, but they're less deadly. But that could escalate, and they could, in fact, have a Tim McVeigh hiding in their group. On the other hand, as an officer, you're more likely to see them in your jurisdiction. And they do target officers. They view officers as members of racist organizations. Some jurisdictions just happen to be more sympathetic to Antifa cause, or they're unwilling to respond, as they were in Berkeley. In a previous video, I highlighted the response of one city to an alt-right Antifa protest. Now, I stated that there were no real hardcore people on one side or the other. But a big part of that was because of the proactive stance of law enforcement. They announced in advance the rules and guidelines, and they removed the literal and figurative weapons from both sides. In this video clip from Alabama, notice how the Antifa members hide their faces from the camera when the Auburn police make them remove their masks. Now, they're less likely to be violent without this anonymity. However, they do let them keep their shields, clubs, poles that are attached to the flags, and probably some other things that we can't see. And finally, I want you to remember these things. Antifa is a violent organization, and they have a tendency to be violent towards the police. They think they're legally savvy, and always remember there are cameras everywhere. On the next episode of Counter-Terrorism Roll Call, we'll continue with this theme of domestic groups. The FBI just released an intelligence assessment on Black Identity Extremists, BIE. We're going to examine who they are and how the BIE are targeting law enforcement officers. Until then, be alert and be safe. Thanks for watching. Please visit our sponsor, patriotthreads.org, and stay tuned for a special offer from them. Would you do me a favor and hit the like button? And if you haven't yet, subscribe. If you want to know more about me, go to my website, follow me on Twitter, or just run me on NCIC. I'll see you next week on Counterterrorism Roll Call. Until then, be alert, be safe. PatriotThreads.org is apparel with a purpose. Patriot Threads offers state-themed, game day to outdoor lifestyle apparel, like the new line of Southern Trout shirts, and introducing the new Back the Blue shirts. All are 100% printed in the USA. Are you looking for a new, exciting, profitable fundraiser? PatriotThreads.org would love to help. Go to their website for details. Use promo code ROLLCALL at checkout and you could save 20% on the sale. And Patriot Threads will donate 20% of the profits to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. PatriotThreads.org is a proud sponsor of the men and women of law enforcement.